Hey everybody, and welcome to the Deep Dive. We love to get in deep with some sources, and I think we've got a really cool mix for you all today about the impact of social media on society.
Oh, yeah.
We've got some global stuff from the Pew Research Center, some like pros and cons lists from Simply Learn, and we've even got some stuff from the Ad Council about how they see social media playing a role in public health crises and even activism.
Wow.
This is going to be a fascinating journey as we kind of uncover, how social media is shaping our world for better, maybe for worse.
It's so interesting just thinking about how people around the world view social media's role in democracy. Like, I was looking at this Pew Research Center study, and they did a study across 19 countries. And while a lot of people see social media as like a good thing for democracy, the US really stands out as being more skeptical.
Oh, really?
Yeah, only about a third of Americans think that social media is good for democracy. It really makes you wonder, like, why is there such a difference there?
Yeah, what's driving that? I'm curious to get your thoughts on that as we go through these sources today.
Yeah, for sure.
But speaking of global perspectives, one thing that did seem to resonate across borders is this concern that social media is making people easier to manipulate.
Right.
And that same Q study found that 84% of people across those 19 countries believe that technology is making us more susceptible to misinformation and rumors.
Yeah, and that's a pretty major finding, and I think it speaks to like a real anxiety that people have about the quality of information online.
Yeah.
It's almost paradoxical.
Yeah.
We have access to more information than ever before, yet we also feel more vulnerable to being misled.
Right.
And it really just shows how important it is to be able to like think critically in this digital age.
Absolutely. We're walking a tightrope between being informed and being completely misinformed.
Yeah.
And that actually brings us to Simply Learn's analysis, the advantages and disadvantages of social media. And they paint a picture of this double-edged sword, where the same platforms that connect us and give us access to information can also be used for cyberbullying,
Right.
or to exploit our data,
Yeah.
or even to fuel addictive behaviors.
It's like fire. You can use fire to cook your food, or you can use it to burn down your house, and it all comes down to how we wield it.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So speaking of wielding power, let's shift gears and talk about how social media is being used in the realms of marketing and social movements.
Yeah, okay, let's dive in.
So Simply Learn talks about how companies are using social media for things like brand building and engaging with customers.
Right.
Using targeted ads on platforms like Facebook and Instagram to reach very specific groups of people, which can be incredibly effective from a marketing standpoint.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and it's not just businesses who are like harnessing the power of social media. The Ad Council points out how social media platforms have become super vital tools for activists and social movements.
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about movements like Me Too or Black Lives Matter. These movements gained incredible momentum and actually spurred real-world change, and social media was a big part of amplifying their message and mobilizing supporters.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how social media can be used to create these global waves of awareness and action, but it's also important to acknowledge the impact it's having on the political landscape.
Totally.
And Gero Education dives into this, and they talk about how social media has completely transformed the way candidates campaign and connect with voters.
It's true. On the one hand, it gives candidates a much broader reach and allows them to engage with voters directly, which, can be great for transparency and accountability. But on the other hand, there's the risk of misinformation spreading rapidly and creating these echo chambers where people are only exposed to information that reinforces their existing views.
Right, it's like everyone's living in their own little filter bubble.
Exactly.
It can be really hard to break out of that. So again, we have to be really discerning about what we consume and share online, especially when it comes to political content.
Right.
But let's move on to the final topic for this part of our deep dive, which is social media and mental health.
Okay.
This is a topic that's generating a lot of discussion and research, and for good reason.
Yeah. The Ad Council highlights this growing concern about digital loneliness, which is this feeling of isolation that can arise from spending too much time online. And it's not just the time spent, it's the design of many social media platforms, like that endless scroll.
Oh, yeah.
That can really keep us hooked and distract us from real life interactions.
I've definitely felt that pull before you just keep scrolling and scrolling,
Right.
and before you know it, you've lost hours of your day.
Oh, totally. And it's not just the time suck. There's also this pressure to present like a perfect curated version of ourselves online. It's like we're all performing for this invisible audience, and it can lead to feelings of inadequacy and anxiety when our real lives don't measure up to the filtered perfection we see on our screens.
It really makes you wonder, is social media ultimately making us more connected, or is it actually driving us further apart? It's a question worth pondering as we move into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore even more facets of this complex relationship between social media and society.
Awesome. I'm excited. Welcome back to our deep dive. Before we move on, I want to circle back to something we were discussing earlier about the potential for social media to be used for good.
Yeah.
Jar Education makes this really interesting point about the role social media can play in mental health.
Oh, you're right. We've been focusing a lot on the downside.
Yeah.
I'm actually really curious to hear about the positive side of things.
Yeah, for sure. So while it's true that there are real concerns about, the negative impacts of social media on mental health, it's important to remember that these platforms can also be used to connect people with support and resources.
Okay.
So Jar Education points out that social media can actually help reduce the stigma surrounding mental health issues by giving people a platform to share their experiences and find community.
Right.
And it can also be a really valuable tool for connecting people with mental health professionals and support groups.
So it's not just about doom scrolling and comparison traps.
Exactly.
Social media can actually be a lifeline for people who are struggling.
Right. It really comes back to how we choose to use these tools and the intentions behind the platforms we create. But let's turn our attention now to a topic that's been in the news a lot lately.
Okay.
The spread of misinformation online.
Oh, man. Yeah, it seems like every time you open your phone, there's a news story about fake news or conspiracy theories going viral.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a bit overwhelming.
It's definitely a serious issue. The Pew Research Center found that a median of 70% of people across 19 countries believe that the spread of false information online is a major threat to their country. And remember, this research was done back in 2022.
Oh, wow.
So it's likely those numbers have only increased.
It makes you wonder what we can do to combat this, tidal wave of misinformation. Is there any hope?
There are some strategies being explored. One key approach is media literacy, equipping people with the skills to critically evaluate information online and identify misinformation.
Okay.
So it's like teaching people how to be digital detectives, to spot the red flags and, avoid falling for that clickbait or emotionally manipulative content.
So we need to become more savvy consumers of online information.
Yes, exactly. And that's where organizations like the Ad Council come in. They play a vital role in creating these public awareness campaigns about media literacy and responsible social media use. But education is only one piece of the puzzle. We also need to think about the role of platforms themselves.
Right. You're talking about holding social media companies accountable for the content that spreads on their platforms.
Exactly. The American Public University highlights this very issue. They raise concerns about the immense power these platforms have to control the flow of information. It's this really complex debate about balancing censorship versus freedom of speech.
Yeah.
And finding ways to protect users from harmful content while still allowing for open dialogue and diverse perspectives.
It feels like a constant tug of war.
It is.
Between wanting to protect people and wanting to uphold freedom of expression. It's not an easy line to walk.
It's not, and the stakes are really high. The decisions these companies make have a ripple effect across society.
Yeah, they really do.
They can influence elections, public health outcomes, even our understanding of truth.
It's a lot of responsibility, and it feels like there's a lot of pressure on these companies to get it right.
Yeah, you're right. But let's not forget about the potential for social media to be a force for good. The American Public University offers some inspiring examples.
Oh yeah, I remember them touching on that in one of the articles.
They talk about how social media is being used to raise awareness for important social causes and to facilitate fundraising campaigns for everything from disaster relief to medical research.
That's amazing.
Right. They also highlight how these platforms are providing educational opportunities through online courses and tutorials, making learning more accessible to people all over the world.
It's incredible how much potential there is.
And of course, we can't forget about the positive impact on businesses. Both Simply Learn and Jar Education talk about how these platforms have transformed the way companies connect with customers and build their brands.
So as we've been saying all along, social media is a multifaceted tool
For sure.
with the potential for both harm and good.
Exactly. It's a reflection of our human nature, with all its complexities and contradictions. And while there are many challenges to address, it's also important to acknowledge the potential these platforms have to connect us, inform us, and inspire us.
It's easy to get caught up in the negativity, but it's important to remember that social media can be a powerful force for positive change too.
I completely agree. So, reflecting on everything we've learned, social media is this global phenomenon with huge implications for democracy politics, mental health, and the way information is shared and consumed.
It really feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this vast and ever-evolving landscape.
I know we've covered a lot of ground,
We have.
but there's still so much more to explore. In part 3 of this deep dive, we'll look at the future of social media and consider some of the key questions shaping the conversation around these powerful platforms.
I can't wait. I'm so excited. So welcome back to the show. It's time to wrap things up and really look ahead. I'm curious what you think the future holds for social media, and what are the big questions that we should be asking ourselves as it just continues evolving?
One thing's clear from all these sources we looked at, so social media is not going anywhere. And in fact, the American Public University predicts that usage is going to continue to skyrocket.
Oh, wow.
They estimate that by 2027, over half of the world's population will be using social media.
That's a crazy number of people.
Right.
It really makes you wonder what kind of world that's going to create. And as it becomes even more integrated into our lives, how do we ensure that it's being used responsibly?
That's the big question, right? And the American Public University really gets into this whole debate about the role of governments and tech companies in regulating content and protecting user privacy. So as social media grows, so do the calls for greater accountability and transparency.
It's such a tricky balancing act, though. How do you protect people from harmful content without stifling freedom of expression? Finding that sweet spot is going to be a key challenge moving forward.
Absolutely, and it's a conversation that's only going to get more complex as technology advances. Speaking of which, another big question for the future is the impact of AI on social media.
Oh yeah, AI, it's everywhere now. It seems like it's only natural that it would play a bigger role in social media too.
Exactly. Jaro Education actually mentioned how AI is already being used to personalize our social media experiences, from the content we see in our feeds to the ads we're shown. It's all designed to keep us engaged in scrolling, but it also raises some ethical concerns about how our data is being used and how these algorithms are shaping our perceptions of the world.
I've definitely noticed how social media seems to know what I'm thinking sometimes.
Yeah.
It can be helpful, but it's also kind of creepy to know that algorithms are influencing what I see and how I experience those platforms.
Right. It's the double-edged sword of AI, I guess. It can be incredibly powerful and useful.
Yeah.
But it also has the potential to be invasive and manipulative, and as AI continues to evolve, it's just going to have an even greater impact on how these platforms operate and how we interact with them.
It feels like we're at this critical point.
Yeah.
We have this incredibly powerful tool at our fingertips, but it's not entirely clear which direction we're headed. What will social media even look like in 5 years, in 10 years? It's kind of daunting to think about.
I know, it's definitely a time of rapid change and uncertainty, but I also think that's what makes this moment so exciting.
Yeah.
We have this opportunity to shape the future of social media, to steer it towards a path that benefits both individuals and society as a whole.
So how do we do that? What does responsible social media use even look like in a world where these platforms are just becoming so deeply woven into the fabric of our lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And while there are no easy answers, I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
The more we understand about the potential benefits and risks of social media, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this crazy complex landscape.
So it's about making informed choices, not just passively consuming whatever comes across our feeds.
Exactly.
We need to be critical thinkers, discerning consumers of information, and active participants in shaping the digital world that we want to live in.
You said it perfectly. The choices we make today, individually, collectively, and as a society, will determine the future of social media. It's in our hands to decide whether these platforms will be used to connect us, to empower us, or to divide us.
It's a powerful message to end on, and as we wrap up this deep dive into the impact of social media on society, we want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. In a world increasingly reliant on these platforms, what responsibility do we bear to ensure social media is a force for good? It's a question worth reflecting on, discussing with others, and most importantly, acting upon. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.